Welcome back to the range. Today we are conducting a hard reality check on the hardware you trust with your life. In this community, we spend a massive amount of time glorifying the top-tier systems, the gear that runs dirty, the optics that hold zero through hell and high water, and the ballistics that define modern marksmanship. But there is a shadow side to this industry. I see it constantly. Folks panic buying rifles because they look tactical, or worse, simply because the price tag was low enough to fly under the radar of the household budget. If you are purchasing a tool to defend your life or to put meat on the table when the supply chain snaps, good enough is going to get you killed. We are not talking about minor inconveniences here. We are talking about failures to feed, receivers that crack under thermal stress, and platforms that turn into expensive clubs the moment you introduce them to the harsh reality of the elements. Today, we are going to break down the science of the most underestimated cartridge in history, the .22 long rifle, to understand what a rimfire system should do. Then, we are going to ruthlessly critique 8 specific rifles that promise survival capability but deliver nothing but liability. Finally, we will look at the gold standard against which all others are measured. These are the systems you must understand, and in many cases avoid if you value reliability over gimmicks. First on the chopping block is a piece of gear that receives an inexplicable amount of hype in the prepper and survivalist communities, the Chiappa Little Badger. On paper, I understand the appeal. It is a minimalist Italian design that folds in half and weighs less than 3 pounds. It feels like the kind of tool you could toss into a day pack and completely forget it exists until you need it. However, we are dealing with reality, not theory, and the reality is that this thing is essentially a wire coat hanger with a trigger mechanism attached to it. The primary point of failure here begins with the sights. They are absolute garbage. We are talking about polymer sights that warp, bend, and lose their integrity if you so much as look at them wrong. I have personally witnessed these rifles come straight out of the box with the rear sight already twisted and unusable. In a survival scenario, if you cannot aim, you cannot eat. It is that simple. Then we have the ergonomics, or rather, the complete lack thereof. Unless you have the skeletal frame of a kindergartner, the length of pull is going to force you into a shooting stance that is incredibly awkward and unstable. At 25 yards, you might manage to get a group. At 50 yards, you are just making noise and wasting precious ammunition. Furthermore, do not get me started on the hammer extension accessory. People install this thinking it is a tactical upgrade, but it is a trap. It adds mass to the hammer, which slows down the lock time and frequently causes light primer strikes. You pull the trigger, expecting a bang, and instead, you get a click. In a high-stakes environment, that click is the loudest sound you will ever hear. Next up is a rifle that breaks my heart because the concept is so strong, but the execution is fatal. The Kel-Tec SU-16A. A folding 5.56 NATO rifle that accepts standard AR magazines and features a built-in bipod sounds incredibly tactical. It sounds like the perfect truck gun for a get-home bag. But physics does not care about your cool features list, and physics is where this rifle fails. The fundamental flaw of this weapon is its construction. It is built largely out of polymer, and I am not talking about the high-grade, glass-filled nylon you find on a Glock frame that can take a beating. This material is brittle. When you run a high-pressure round like the 5.56 through a plastic receiver repeatedly, the stress begins to accumulate. We have documented cases of receivers cracking right at the rear, specifically near the bolt carrier travel path. That is a catastrophic failure that renders the weapon useless. The front sight is another significant weak point. It is held on by hardware that tends to walk out under the vibration of recoil. This means your zero is constantly shifting, and you will never have confidence in where that round is going. And that integrated bipod that serves as the handguard? It is flimsy. It flexes significantly when you load into it, which throws your shots wide of the target. Sure, Kel-Tec has a warranty, but in a grid-down situation, you cannot mail your rifle back to the factory and wait 6 weeks for a repair. You need a rifle that runs 5,000 rounds, not 500. Taking the next spot is the Mossberg 702 Plinkster. This is a budget gun coming in around $150, and let me tell you, you are not even getting what you pay for. This is a plastic disaster from muzzle to buttstock. The receiver is cast from a cheap alloy, and the internal components are a mess of poor engineering that simply cannot stand up to field use. The recoil spring is particularly prone to kinking during field stripping. Once that spring bends, and it will, your reliability is gone. You will see failures to feed, failures to eject, and stovepipes constantly. The extractor design is lazy, frequently leaving spent brass stuck in the chamber, forcing you to dig it out with a knife while your target escapes. But the real safety hazard here involves the magazine disconnect and the bolt assembly. The follower in the magazine is supposed to act as a bolt hold-open mechanism. However, when you strip that magazine out, the bolt can slam forward unexpectedly. We have also seen reports of out-of-battery detonations. This occurs when the round fires before it is fully seated in the chamber. When this happens, the case ruptures, blowing hot gas and brass fragments right into your face. That is not a malfunction. That is a health hazard. At 25 yards, this rifle patterns like a shotgun. Do not trust it with your safety. Coming in next is a disappointment from a brand that usually delivers. Savage makes incredible bolt-action rifles, but the Model 64 Takedown is a massive miss. The entire premise of a takedown rifle is that it returns to zero when you put it back together. If it cannot do that, it is useless. This system fails that test miserably. The barrel nut and the locking mechanism are inconsistent. That leads to point-of-impact shifts every single time you reassemble the weapon. You take it apart to stow it, put it back together to shoot, and your bullet impacts 3 inches to the left. Mechanically, it is a headache. The ejector is held in place by a screw that likes to back out under vibration. When that happens, the gun jams tight. Owners are having to bathe that screw in blue Loctite just to get through a single range session. The charging handle is also problematic. If you dry fire this weapon with the barrel removed, you can physically damage the bolt handle and the receiver channel. Furthermore, the quality control leaving the factory is spotty at best. We are talking about front sights that are canted so far over, you literally cannot zero them. The controls are stiff, the edges are sharp enough to cut you, and the accuracy is a total coin toss. For the price of the 64, you are in the same territory as a Ruger 1022. Do yourself a favor and just buy the Ruger. If this next rifle looks familiar, it is because it is essentially the same gun as the Mossberg 702 we just discussed. Number 6 is the Rossi RS-22. They are both manufactured by CBC in Brazil, but somehow Rossi managed to degrade the quality even further. Spare magazines for this platform are basically unobtainium. If you lose the one that came in the box, good luck finding a replacement in a survival situation. You will be left with a single-shot rifle that is difficult to load. The trigger feels like dragging a concrete block through a gravel pit. It is heavy, gritty, and completely unpredictable, making precision work nearly impossible. But the biggest issue here is heat management. The barrel profile is extremely thin, almost pencil-like. After dumping just one 20-round magazine, that barrel heats up intensely and starts to warp. Your groups will open up from 2 inches to 6 inches at 50 yards. That is unacceptable for small game hunting where you are aiming for a squirrel's head. The safety selector is mushy with no tactile click, meaning you never really know if the weapon is safe or hot without looking at it. And if you need customer support, you are on your own. This is a disposable rifle, not a survival tool. Moving up to centerfire bolt actions, we have the Mossberg Patriot. This was an attempt to make an entry-level bolt gun, but they cut way too many corners to get the price down. The action feels incredibly sloppy. When you run the bolt, there is a massive amount of play and wobble. It feels like it is going to bind up if you run it hard under stress. The magazine design is atrocious. It uses a plastic detachable box magazine that feels like a child's toy. The feed lips deform over time, leading to bolt-over brass malfunctions where the bolt slides over the top of the cartridge instead of picking it up. But the real deal breaker is the bedding. The stock is injection-molded plastic with zero rigidity. When you tighten the action screws to spec, you can actually crush the plastic trigger guard and compress the stock material. This puts uneven stress on the receiver and destroys accuracy. We are seeing patterns of 3 to 4 minutes of angle right out of the box. For a modern bolt-action rifle, that is pathetic performance. We have seen firing pins breaking and extractors failing to grab the rim of the case. It is just a catalog of quality control failures. Do not take this into the field expecting it to perform. Now we are stepping up in price, but not in reliability with the Desert Tech Wolverine, also known as the WLV-RN. This is a bullpup design, meaning the action is located behind the trigger group. While that saves overall length, it creates a nightmare for the trigger linkage. The trigger pull is long, spongy, and vague. You never know exactly when the break is coming, which ruins your ability to make precise shots. It is also heavy, sitting at over 8 pounds. For a survival rifle, weight is your enemy. Ounces equal pounds, and pounds equal pain when you are rucking over rough terrain. The manual of arms is completely proprietary. The magazine release and the charging methods are different from almost every other standard rifle on the planet. That means your muscle memory from the AR platform or the AK platform does not transfer here. Parts availability is a major concern. If a spring breaks or a pin shears in a collapsed scenario, you are not finding a replacement at the local hardware store. You have effectively bought a $2,000 paperweight. It is overly complex, difficult to field strip without losing small parts, and simply not worth the investment for a rugged survival application. We have the Steyr Scout RFR. Steyr is a legendary name, and the original Scout rifle concept by Jeff Cooper is brilliant. However, this rimfire version is an insult to that legacy. It costs around $700, and for that money, you get a straight pull action that feels like it is full of sand. It binds constantly. It requires a very specific, forceful motion to cycle reliably, which disrupts your sight picture. The magazine retention system is fundamentally flawed. Magazines have a tendency to drop free while you are shooting or not seat properly in the first place, causing feeding issues. The rail system for mounting optics sits incredibly high over the bore axis. This forces you to use a chin weld instead of a proper cheek weld, which destroys your consistency and stability. The bipod legs are integrated into the forend, but they are flimsy and prone to breaking under load. Despite the high price tag, there is plastic everywhere. The accuracy is mediocre, barely keeping up with rifles that cost a third of the price. You are paying for the brand name and the futuristic look, but you are not paying for performance. This is a range toy, not a survival tool. Listen to me closely. When the adrenaline is dumping and your fine motor skills degrade, you need a weapon system that is boringly reliable. You need something with parts commonality, proven durability, and simple controls. Do not get distracted by the gimmicks. Do not buy junk simply because it is cheap. Invest in quality. We have looked at the science of the .22 long rifle, and we have looked at the systems that fail to respect that science. Whether you choose the legendary utility of the Ruger or you decide to risk it on a budget folding rifle, remember that the only thing that matters in the field is whether it goes bang when you pull the trigger. If I just saved you a few $100 and a lot of heartache, do me a favor. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below on what your go-to survival rifle is. I want to hear what you are running. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and keep your powder dry. I will see you in the next one.